Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for this video. Today we're going to talk about mathematical practices and how you can use them to build a pathway to equitable and rigorous PBL projects. We are Sarah D. Maria, Carly Mattis, and Sheila Orr, and collectively we are Progress Pathways, and we work to provide equitable, high-quality, discipline-rich math experiences to all students by supporting teachers to create environments where students can explore and learn and thrive. Our plan for this video is we are going to first kind of just frame why we need to talk about practices. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how you can put it into practice, do some strategizing, and then give you a chance to do a little noticing, wondering on your own teaching practice. So to start, we want to give you some time to just think. And so if you are familiar with the standards of mathematical practice, if you're a math teacher, if you're a science teacher, you have equivalent experiences with NGSS, and I would say other content areas. If you have somehow found this video and you're still here, um, there are disciplinary practices that you all use, but we have the 8 mathematical standards of mathematical practice up. And what we want you to do is take a moment and you can pause this video and just reflect for yourself. What is a disciplinary practice you use in your everyday life outside of your work as a teacher? So, how do you, when you leave the school building, model with mathematics or attend to precision? So, just think about that for a second. And once you think you have an answer, you can unpause the video and join us back up. All right, so hopefully you have some great ideas about how you think you're using these practices in your daily life. And one thing that we really think about is that equitable learning and creating these experiences that serve all our students really thrive with the use and at the intersection of project-based learning and intentionally planning and using the mathematical practices.
We're excited that you've joined us to talk about practice pathways. And when we think about practice pathways, we situate them within our larger PBL project planning pyramid as one of the core components that support towards those discipline-rich STEM projects. And so we're going to hone right in on that core piece. And if you're interested in the other pieces, we hope you'll join us in other videos. As we think about the big idea for the practice pathway, we really see it, I'm going to read this aloud to you, as a tool for developing the sequence of activities in a project to support students in developing and using a targeted disciplinary practice in order to build their capacity with the practice across the project. This is a long way to say that we really see the practice pathway as a way to attend to and really encourage students to grow and hone in their disciplinary practices, not just allow them to hopefully happen alongside a project. So when we think about the core components, the first is that although your PBL projects can and should use many practices, the practice pathway invites you to hone in on just one. We often call it the priority practice, and that you're intentionally developing that throughout the project. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Additionally, students are engaging in the practice in a way that mirrors the work of professionals. This might be similar to your reflection earlier when you were thinking about how do you use the disciplinary practice in your life, but then we're situating it in the STEM professions in which we're inviting students to take on as roles in the projects they're engaging in. Another key component is that students have multiple opportunities to both engage in the practice and receive feedback. This is important, that it's not just a one-off, that students are just seeing the practice and being expected to already be experts in it, but the practice pathway is really about these multiple moments that students are utilizing the practice, and then you're explaining to them how they can improve it and how they can use it even more efficiently as they continue into the project work. And that comes into this last one, where the activities support students in building that capacity with the practice over time. We'll show you a practice in a little bit where you'll see across the different checkpoints of the practice that we see those multiple opportunities growing and building that capacity over time for that one and single practice. It's important to note when we think about the PBL project planning pyramid, that without this practice pathway, we think that what students lose in this moment is the loss of coherence. The project no longer is situated in these skills and practices that allow for the learning to get deeper. Instead, it remains shallow, and we really see students only leaving the projects thinking about those elements of PBL, or that maybe those content storylines. But this practice pathway is a core piece to really hone across. The last big component that we think about when we think about the practice pathways is these principles. I'll give you a moment to read those to yourself. Across these four principles, we see again that reflection of the meaningful, authentic purpose, those repeated opportunities that are helping students to see the refinement of that practice, that student thinking is both visible and valued. We see that through the assets that students are being invited to do. And so we invite you again to pause this video and take a moment to reflect. In your current practice, how do you support student development of the disciplinary practices? And maybe also, what are some ways that you're thinking you might improve? Once you've taken some time to reflect, we invite you to join us again.
So now that we've talked about the grounding of what a practice pathway is and how we're thinking about the importance of practices, we want to talk about a little bit about like, what does this actually look like in your day-to-day work as a teacher? You're thinking about, I want to develop a practice throughout a project or across a unit. What would that look like? And so the first step that we think about with this is this idea of, like Carly had said, choosing and unpacking a priority practice. You are picking one practice that you really want to focus on. And to pick one and to be able to teach a practice really deeply, it means you need to know the practice. So you need to read it, you need to sit with it, you need to work to unpack it. So first, you're going to go ahead and pick your practice. So here is a number of the 8 practices, the standards for mathematical practice again. And so the example we're going to walk through today is an example where the teacher picked attending to precision. And so if you think about the standards for mathematical practice, if you go on the Common Core's website, it's not just attentive precision. There is a whole set of language that comes along with this. And as you can see in the words that we've bolded, like the key things that in this case we want to attend to, because again, remember, attend to precision, you're not going to do the whole practice in one project and then that they're going to know that this is built over time. The standards of mathematical practice go from K-12. So in kindergarten, it's going to look very different than it's going to look in 12th grade, but you're still thinking about how to attend to precision and what does these skills look like at your students' developmental level and grade level. And so in this case, we're thinking about what does it mean to communicate precisely? What does it mean to use clear definitions in discussions with others and their own reasoning? And how do you calculate things accurately and efficiently? So in this case, we're not thinking, I know a lot of times when I was teaching, just thought about attend to precision as like, can I measure exactly? Am I rounding to the right decimal place? But here we're really zooming in on these communication aspects, making sure we're clear on our explanations, our definitions, and we're doing things accurately and efficiently. And so once you have unpacked it, then the next step is thinking about the alignment of the priority practice and thinking about how does this align to the end product of my project? And so thinking, knowing that we have this idea of what our end product is, we need to go, if you've already picked it, you need to go back and be like, does this make sense for the practice? Or if you have your so maybe I need to change my end product, or do I need to change my practice? So we're going to talk about a couple examples of good alignment or like questionable alignment. So if you see, so in these, a couple examples, we have a couple different project examples. We have one where we're thinking about a community garden. And so the final product is a scaled garden layout. And they picked using appropriate tools strategically. And that's super well aligned because The students had to pick the tool they were going to use to measure the area. They had to create a scale model, which involved using technology and thinking about if I'm going to create this, am I drawing it? Am I using like a CAD modeling software? Which one is the best for me to do the thing I need to do? And I need to justify those choices I'm making. Um, Another one that's maybe partially aligned, but not quite like fully aligned is this third one, the local transit proposal. So they're creating a brochure to outline how to improve transit. And the practice that had been picked was to look for and make use of structure. And this is partially aligned because it does involve using patterns and schedules and routes. But if we are not explicit in the task and we're helping make those connections and giving students opportunities to reflect on them and grow in that practice, we're just like, oh, look, they have to look at patterns. They're going to make use of structure. Check. That's where the alignment can fall apart. And so it can only be partially aligned. Where in this last one, we have a misaligned project. In the water quality report project, they wanted students to be able to communicate presentations with charts and visuals, and they had picked attend to precision. And so in this case, because the focus of the project was on big picture trends in visual storytelling, it didn't necessarily require these precise units and definitions and checking for errors in the way that when we broke down the practice it talked about. So it wasn't an appropriate practice. So maybe this is a time that if you're in a situation where you're like, oh, this doesn't do what I wanted to, go and pick a different practice that you think aligns better. Or if you really are like, no, my students need to work on this practice, like we've been struggling with it, maybe it's time to revisit your end product and say, like, oh, maybe I want to change it to better align with my practice. And I don't think there's a right choice whether you're picking practice or end product for the alignment, but just making sure they are aligned and they meet your content standards, which we talk about in a different video.
Okay, so now that we've picked our practice and we've looked at the alignment, now we are going to think about how to give students this practice with the practice, these learning opportunities along the way across the project. And so we need to actually grow the student across the project in this practice, not just at the end. So to think about this, we are going to situate ourselves into a project that I used in my class many times. And we're going to think about a project that's got a driving question of how can we as budgeters for our school understand polynomials and linear equations to be able to communicate with precision to persuade the student body and administration to approve our school field trip and budget. In this final product here, students are creating a presentation to sway the school, to sway the student body and the administration to go on a field trip that they've designed and budgeted for. So they're going to create models. And across this, students will need to reason precisely to convince peers and student council to actually, and the principal to actually take the trip. We're going to think about how these learning opportunities happen. And what we want to think about is how does this happen multiple times? And not just like, oh, it's occurring because they have to make graphs, or it's occurring at the end when they put the project together. But over the course of the entire project, where are these multiple opportunities and what activities help us help students build and revise their understanding of the practice? So we use this through checkpoints. And so if we think about this project attending to precision, one thing you might do early on is calculate some costs and think about ideas. And so students need to communicate clear units and details. And then the teacher can make sure that at that point we can check in around if their data is accurate from the start. So they're using the correct numbers as they continue to build their models. Later on, if we move to an additional checkpoint, they're starting to actually build out that model and then check their work to make sure they're coming back to those values. So they might draft a budget and make sure that the equations are labeled accurately, and the teacher's looking for notation and the labeling conventions that are uniform across the project to project. And then as we reach closer to the end, we've got that full financial plan coming in, perhaps, and students are revising these models. They're making assumptions and just starting to draw conclusions with these updated costs. They're getting peer feedback. The teacher is potentially looking at starting to support students in constructing that like end presentation. So maybe there's some sentence frames and really talking about, okay, now that we know your data is correct, how are you communicating it to that audience and making those summary statements? And then we come to that final presentation, that big, nice, beautiful thing that they're putting together at the end. And we're really thinking about, okay, now how do we pull it all together so that you have a nice, cohesive presentation with the details correct? So it's a lot of really reinforcing those pieces now that you've worked on through the entire project to really showcase the growth they've made on that priority practice. And so as you think about this, I know we went quickly and have forgiven you a lot to think about and how to better support scaffolding these disciplinary practices. I want you to, again, as we conclude the videos, to think about how in your current work, where are some small pieces where you could just add a little bit more support of that disciplinary practice in the work that your students are already doing. We want to thank you for joining us tonight, and we hope that you continue to reflect and that you connect with us. So here are some opportunities if you're on social media in different ways or our website, or feel free to reach out to us via email. We'd love to hear where you're taking these ideas next.